All right, guys, let's get over to the other game, the AFC game, Kansas City and Buffalo. And, this has got a matchup of obviously two potential Super Bowl teams. We're not going to say that the other one doesn't, but these two teams, if either one won this game, we would not be at all surprised that they would make it to the Super Bowl, having gone this far. Victor, what do you think happens here between the Chiefs and the Bills, who know each other quite well?
Again, we're dealing currently with the same over-under line as the NFC Championship game, 47.5. Point spread a lot different, though. KC, 1.5? There's probably some -2s out there in regards to the Chiefs. We'll call the current implied score Kansas City 24.5, Buffalo 23.0. Again, the implied score based on the current point spread and current over-under line. Buffalo, we've talked about them all season long. A very good over team, 12 overs, 7 unders thus far in their 19 total games this season. 5 and 4 over under on the way. What was important, though, was in the last month of play, or last 5 or 6 weeks, Buffalo's last 4 road games were extremely high scoring as that defense started to weaken a lot in the last month of the season. Their last 4 road games, actually 4-0 to the over, 66.2 combined points per game. KC, just like the other game, it's kind of a flip-flop in regards to over-under results. 7-11 over-under on the season. They finished the year by going under in 6 of their last 7 games, the Chiefs. Their only over in the last 7 games was that regular season game against Houston, in which I believe they won 26-19. 4 and 5 over under at home this year. It has been a pretty high scoring series, guys. 5 out of the last 7 meetings between these two have gone over. 5 overs, only 2 unders. Average 54.4 points per game. With that said, however, in each of the last 3 AFC Championship games have gone under the total. 4, 8, and 1 in the last 13 years, 67% under the total. So at this point, we'll kind of lean under. The one ATS stat that really jumps out at me, Mark, and I'm sure you've seen this one as well, is that when you win at home in the playoffs as an underdog, that's instant fade material in the next game. And you know what Buffalo did last week? Despite being out-yarded by Baltimore by almost 150 yards, they did win outright as a home underdog. This is from the database going all the way back to 1984. Playoff road teams off a playoff home dog win, 1-16 ATS.
Oh,
For me, it's going to be the Chiefs or
wow.
nobody in regards to the side. The only advantage that Buffalo has in this game, if you ask me, is that they currently have a rushing advantage over the Chiefs. But Kansas City has got advantages in the coaching department, on defense, on special teams, been there, done that, and they're at home. I'm not taking Buffalo in the game. It's going to be KC or nothing, and right now we're leaning under, Mark.
Yeah, that goes to that home dog straight up winner in the playoffs, Victor, and how poorly they fare on the road the next game. And it applies obviously here in this football game. Good part on your side to call that out in this particular matchup here. So, Jim, now you've been dazzled by Victor and all those stats and everything, but I kind of feel all season long you've been a Kansas City Chief guy, and I think you sense the Chiefs are going to win 3 in a row here. So, am I going to be correct in my presumption that you're going to go with Kansas City in this game?
Well, I had Kansas City against the Lions in the Super Bowl, which I'm not going to get because the Lions are gone. But so it'll probably be Kansas City, Philadelphia, because that's the way I'm going. I like Kansas City in the game, but it's the same kind of analysis that I had a year ago when they played San Francisco. Andy Reid and Spagnuolo and Mahomes and Kelsey and this team, and I've used what Victor said, been there, done that. They know how to win. And knowing how to win, and I didn't know about the underdog on the road thing, which is mind-boggling, 1-16. But I'm on Kansas City. I bet them on the money line. You know I do that with small favorites.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And I like the under as well. because I see the tendency with these coaches this year of not wanting to make the big mistake. And you pointed out, this is the first time we have all these teams that didn't turn the ball over last week. And I think that's going to continue. The highest risk offense so far in these games is Washington. Now, they didn't turn the ball over, but that's the one team that's more likely, in my mind, would be Washington. I don't see the head coach for Buffalo doing that. He's a very conservative guy. And when you look at how he played the second half last week with the lead, and I think that's a huge mistake to wait for the other team to catch up. When you have that kind of offense and you have Josh Allen, you don't go a whole half. I don't care how good the other defense is, and only score 0 points in the third quarter and 6 points in the fourth quarter. That's bad coaching to me. That allows the other team to have that almost tied the game with the catch in the end zone and on the 2-point conversion. That's bad coaching. You're supposed to not do. I mean, we also saw it with Day in the championship game. Had the big lead, all the offensive talent, wait for the other team, and they almost came back and, well, maybe not won, but covered. They didn't, but they almost did. I don't like that kind of coaching. I like when you put your foot on their neck and kill them. And Andy Reid is like that, and Spagnuolo knows how to play defense. I mean, all the edges are Kansas City. Everybody can point out that they just never really excelled this year as far as having big spreads in their games and stuff. And they won all these games by narrow margins. I understand that, but they won them. And this line is almost disrespectful.
Well, I like that kill factor, Jim. That's what we're in it for. We're hunters,
Hunter-gatherers.
Yes, we can smell the blood. Andy, what do you think happens here? Is there blood to be had in this matchup between these two teams?
Well, I'm going to start out by giving you the same numbers that I looked at before between Washington and Philadelphia. Kansas City played 9 of their 17 games against teams that are Class A, meaning they won 10 or more games. They were 7-2 straight up in those games, 3-5-1 against the spread. Because, again, they were laying numbers that they just weren't interested in covering or weren't able to cover this year. Buffalo only played 6 such games, not 9. They were just 3-3 in those games. And 3-3 against the points. So certainly Kansas City had more opportunities against the good teams and performed better against the good teams. One concern that I have, and I talked about it, I think at the top of the show before we formally started, and last week, of course, much like in the Buffalo-Baltimore game, you look at what the line would be for this game. And I saw the Westgate come out first with a line of Kansas City, I think it was 1, maybe 1.5. I then saw Circa come out about 20 minutes later. They opened that game pick, which really surprised me. I actually thought Kansas City would be about a 2.5 point favorite, maybe even 3 in this spot because of the game that it's a championship, conference championship game, and usually the points don't matter. In fact, I think, if I remember correctly, because I updated the chart that I had not updated for last week, conference championship games, the points don't matter very often. Since 2002, when they had division realignment, there have been 44 championship games, 22 in each conference, and the point spread has only mattered in 7 of those games. So basically, you win the game and you cover the spread, and that would seem to be the case here with this point spread. So I have to believe that the sports books realized that. Again, forget about the regular season matchup. Buffalo always wins the regular season against Kansas City, and everybody knows it. It's in the playoffs that Kansas City has their, call it revenge. I don't like revenge in a game which ends one team's season if they lose. But nonetheless, Kansas City's been able to make the big plays and get the wins in the postseason. So why did Circa, one of the bigger sports books in town, open this game at pick when everywhere else, and I think it stayed there for half an hour or so. Why did they open it at pick? In fact, why did even the Westgate open this game at 1.5? I would have thought, again, it would have been closer to a field goal because at least then a lot of the public might start thinking, I can get Buffalo with a field goal with Josh Allen and all that. And they were able to lay less than a field goal with the team that's won 2 in a row. And yeah, you win close games, but you know what? If you win this game by 2, you're covering that point spread that they were laying 1.5. So I'm a little conflicted there. I'd like to see Buffalo win. Kansas City has been on the precipice of losing a lot of those games. The blocked field goal against Denver, the opening game against Baltimore, when the guy's foot wasn't as large as it was, he doesn't touch the out of bounds at the end. The game against Cincinnati, where Cincinnati needed the last field goal, and those are just 3 of the situations. The numbers do show that the big difference in this game is between the 2 defenses. Buffalo's defense not nearly as good as Kansas City's defense. At the same time, which team has shown this year that they are better at overcoming a deficit between these 2? And that's Buffalo. They just have the offensive power. So it's going to be a matchup of strength against strength, the Buffalo offense against the Kansas City defense, but it's not going to be weakness against weakness in the other part of it, because Buffalo's weakness in the matchup is a lot better than Kansas, or is a lot worse rather. Their weakness is a stronger weakness, a worse weakness, if you will, than Kansas City, whose offense, even an average offense, can have success against the Kansas City defense. If I did anything, I might look under the total in this one, but certainly of the 2 games, this is the one that I'm having the greatest difficulty coming to a conclusion. And of course, I'm going to do that in the next few hours when I finish the newsletter.
Greg, are you having a problem coming to a conclusion in this football game? If not, which side are you going to look at?
No, no problem. I'm in the same boat as Victor. Last week, we talked about having Ohio State and Kansas City parlay Super Bowl and NCAA championship.
Let's do it.
Yep. So I do have to ask Victor. So in your experience, when you're in a situation, I guess some of it does depend on, well, did you do 1 ticket? Did you do a couple of tickets? How much did you invest? And what I'm getting at is, we always talk about hedging at some point. So it's obvious, at least the way it looks now, that unless they win, and then Kansas City plays Washington in the Super Bowl, that you can hedge Kansas City in the Super Bowl really well. Right. The odds will be pretty low. You can even it out, and you're going to be fine. My question is, since it's the same in this game, would you double hedge? Would you say, I'm going to put a little bit of money on Buffalo, or not so much because, well, they still haven't won the Super Bowl? And I'm just saying it as far as maybe even just this game. Then say, you know what, I'm going to take the Bills in a money line in this game, and if they screw my ticket, at least I've got the Bills for a little bit of money. And then if they win again and they get to the Super Bowl, I can hedge again. And I'm sure has a lot to do with how much you invested in the ticket.
Yeah, that's a good point. And it's definitely had me thinking the last couple of days.
It has.
How am I going to approach this game knowing that we've got an Ohio State, Kansas City Chiefs win-it-all ticket? Now, that wasn't a preseason ticket that I played. It was back maybe early mid-December is when I jumped on that ticket. But it definitely has me thinking of which way to go in the game. I've never been much of a hedge guy, and having the access to a database has actually got me potentially thinking about just loading up on the Chiefs this week, even though you've got that thing in your pocket. Just some of the situations, the ATS in our database are mind blowing. And
it's tough to hedge with a 1 in 16 ATS.
Right. I just with a team that has advantages in so many different areas in this game, I think I'm just going to go for broke.
And considering their matchups that strongly favor Kansas City in postseason matchups with Buffalo, those ATS trends, maybe Buffalo accounts for 1 or 2 of those losses, possibly. I'm not sure, but 1 in 16 is very strong. So that's just additional support to what the experience shows.
Victor, one quick note here, though. There's one saying that I've used over and over and over, and I want to mention it here again. And it's that if you're going to bet the house on a game, you better have a backup house.
Well, we never bet the house at a game. We
I'm being
bet what
facetious.
we can afford to lose.
Yeah.
Having fun.
Right.
At the beginning of the season, you set your bankroll, you stick to it.
Exactly.
But
Jim?
there's no way. I mean, this is the NFL. You saw what happened last week. 4 teams won,
Yeah.
despite being outstatted in the game.
Anything can happen.
Yeah.
Yes.
Exactly.
Jim, Mark, have you ever double hedged like a week before in a situation where you know you've got an opportunity to, hey, I could take the Bills on the money line and get a little bit of money back, and I can go back again in the Super Bowl and hedge again if I have to?
I'm not a big hedge guy, so I'll pass it over to Jim. What's your answer?
usually hedge. A couple of years ago, when the Stardust had some big contests, and I was fortunate enough to win, I did have a hedge in the last week, and I ended up winning both the sides of it, the contest and the hedge. So it worked out. But I don't usually do that. I'm pretty convinced that we got the right sides, or I feel like I have the right sides in these games. I've done usually pretty well in these conference championships and Super Bowls, and because I know the teams, and like we all do, and I feel pretty confident in my coaching edges, player edges, situational. I didn't know the 1-16 thing, which only makes me feel better. Thank God it wasn't in reverse. Now I'd really be confused.
Well, if it wasn't in reverse, then wouldn't you then be more, inclined to maybe I'll hedge a little bit on 16-1 against the spread?
Very, very definitely would have pushed me in a different direction. No
Yeah.
question.
Okay.
Yes.
Also, just want to, Andy mentioned, of course, wanting to see the Bills win. Well, I know that we usually save this for the end of the show, but I wanted to pop these comments up from the show last week, actually. And this was over, actually, I believe, over on Playbook, because I'm not sure if anybody's aware. Mark, have you looked at the running total lately? I guess I'll have to look it up. But I know as of last week, we had a nice running total on the Kansas City Houston segment that we posted exclusively over on the Playbook site. And right now it looks like there were over 7,000 views just for that segment last week for the Kansas City Houston talk on this show. And so we had some comments, and Mark B 3786, I will alert the NFL to have the Chiefs removed from the league. Jeff Montgomery, tackle Patrick Mahomes and get a 15-yard penalty. Wow. Nothing but bad calls in the game. And you know what that's about too.
Agreed.
And we wonder why Patrick Mahomes, remember in the beginning of the season, we were all wondering why Patrick Mahomes wasn't on that great player list, the players who voted, who the best players were. We're like, why isn't Patrick Mahomes number one? I think we know why now. And then Michael Stewart, this is a good one to end with. I love all the Chief haters. My advice, play better football, and we can hate too. Andy will have them ready. Arrowhead will be ready too. So Michael's got a great point. I mean, as much as we hate these teams that just keep winning, will someone stand up and just be better? That's what we're not asking them to fail necessarily, but will someone just take it from them? That's what we've been waiting for the past few years. And aren't we still in that run, right? Since Mahomes has been there, when it's been the Bills, except for 1 year, that the Bills are beating the Chiefs in the regular season and the Chiefs wind up winning in the playoffs. I think we've seen that. We've seen that twice. Now we're potentially on a third time. So that's something to keep an eye on. And by the way, you mentioned the conservative nature of the Bills. Keep this in mind. A lot of the talk in Buffalo, and this is not surprising, is the conservative nature of the Bills is due to offensive coordinator Joe Brady.
Right.
He's the guy calling the plays. And remember, and he got the job and he was very successful because he was being not conservative, but he ran the football. He was like, I'm not going to be like the other coordinators. All they did was throw the ball, throw the ball, throw the ball. Bills had no running game. Finally, we have a coordinator that's going to give us balance, so we'll run the ball. But now, apparently, he gets leads and he's running the ball too much to the dislike of Bills fans. So that's something to keep an eye on. And maybe it's up to the head coach to talk. I know it's not maybe it is. It's up to the head coach to go in and have a conversation, maybe at halftime, if you're up big, to not be so conservative.
Hey, Greg, what I'm going to do in this game here is rather than make a final comment on the game, I'm going to save this for my 60-second short. Okay, if I may. But before I get to that 60-second short, I will say this. There's a real common denominator that's working here between these two football teams. And we hit on it a little bit earlier on in the show. And it's the likelihood of either of these two teams beating themselves is like nil and next to none. Kansas City has not turned the ball over their last 8 football games in a row.
Wow.
And Buffalo has not lost the turnovers. You take a look at their last 24 football games, they have not been negative in turnovers in the last 24 games in a row.
Wow.
So, you know, you can look for a clean game here, if nothing else, is sort of where I'm alluding to here, and which will be nice. We won't see laundry on the field for most of this game.